Good evening. Hello, I'm Nancy Baughen, Event Director for CrimeCon UK, partnered by True Crime. And tonight I am excited to welcome you all to Book Club, where we are going to invite the author Tanita Matthews to delve into the book named The Murder of Judith Roberts. So whilst I let everyone join, if you're watching on YouTube or watching on Instagram, catch up. This is the part of Book Club where we just allow some time for followers of CrimeCon to join the chat whilst I wait for the lovely Lisa Howells from Crime Monthly to join me, and then her followers and Tanita can get over and join us. So it's lovely to see so many of you joining. Hello, hello. So whilst we wait for Lisa to join, please pop in the comments if you have already read the book and what comments and questions you have. As you know, Book Club is all about you. So let's find Lisa. Shortly. Thank you very much. I'm excited for this evening, and it's nice to see so many of you joining. Hello, hello. Hi, Lisa.
Hey,
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Not bad, thank you. Not bad. Are we still saying Happy New Year?
Oh, I think we can.
Yeah.
Just this one.
It's this
Happy
one.
New Year.
Yes, it's January. Huh?
How did that happen, honey?
I don't know. It comes around so quick.
How did that happen?
It comes around so quick. We literally, I feel like we just do that full circle so quickly. But here we are again. So it's lovely to see you. So I'm just looking for Tanita. Whilst we do you want to remind everyone what we've been reading?
Yes, we're about to be joined by my special guest here.
Oh, hello.
Oh, I've got another one coming in as well. Right, so we have it going up. You get. We have been reading. Oh, here we go. The Murder of Judith Roberts, The Mark of Peter Sutcliffe. So it's by Clark and Tanita Matthews, and it's one of those reads like when we do the Wests and things like that. It's not an easy read, is it? But it's absolutely fascinating for so many different reasons, which we will all touch upon tonight. But it's one of those where you just think, I think everybody knows that Peter Sutcliffe was not held responsible for everything that he did. I think most people think, yeah, he got away with a lot. And this is talking about some of that, and also about how perhaps he got away with it. But as much as it's about that, it's about a miscarriage of justice. And you're probably going to agree with me, some of that was most of it was mind-boggling, and we'll talk to Tanita about that. But I mean, yeah, we'll get into it, and everyone will share our absolute confusion about how this poor young man could have been basically put in prison for a crime he did not commit.
For such a long time. It was such a long time. So I'm looking for you, the lovely Tanita, at the moment. I don't know if you're here in this chat. I'm trying to find you. Let me try and invite you. But it certainly does delve into so many questions, doesn't it? I mean, a young lad called Andrew Evans was wrongfully convicted for the murder, served so much time, and then it just, I want Tanita, I need her to come along and tell us all about it before we here we are.
Tell you about it, guys, but I'd be more interested if Tanita does it.
Right, I'm just getting her on now. Thank you ever so much for your patience.
And Happy New Year, everybody. Everyone who's watching us, happy 2025.
Yes. Happy
with us.
I've invited you, Tanita. Here we are.
Hello, guys. Lovely to see you. Happy New Year. I'm saying it.
Happy New Year. Well, listen, it's so nice to see you, Tanita, and I know you're a big fan of CrimeCon, and we do know you of old now. It is, but before we get into the book, there'll be a lot of people that are joining tonight that aren't familiar with you. So, do you want to share your role in this whole true crime genre, please, Tanita?
I'd love to. So, for those that don't know or have never met me, or I've never chatted your ear off at CrimeCon. So I am a journalist by trade. I worked in print for a number of years, and true crime became a bit of a speciality of mine. You know, crime and justice, and writing about, you know, all the kind of different things that go with it. And then eventually, about 6 years ago now, I made my way into documentaries, which is something I'd wanted to do for a really long time. And so now I work as a producer, and my kind of niche is in the true crime genre. It is around miscarriages of justice, cold cases, but I do work broadly quite across the genre. I was involved as a researcher at the time in the ITV documentary about Peter Sutcliffe, The Secret Murders, that came out in 22, I think now, which feels weird to think, which was around the time I started writing about Judith. And so the two kind of came at the same time, which was great for the documentary, but also then meant I had my hands very full when I started writing this. Chris and I started writing this book back in 2019, I believe. You know, before the pandemic. And so it's been 5 years of our lives. And obviously, for those that haven't seen, Chris does send his best, but due to technical difficulties, he's not able to join us. So you're just going to have me, I'm afraid. But, Chris and I actually have known each other a really long time as well. When I was working in print and I was writing for a true crime magazine myself, I spoke to Chris and Tim Tate, another journalist, about their book, The Secret Murders, which became the documentary. And yeah, we've all stayed really good friends over the years, and I respect both of them a great deal for all the work they've done. And I came into Judith's story off the back of their book, The Secret Murders, and wanted to focus solely on Judith, because I think there's a lot to her story that actually a lot of people wouldn't have known. Certainly I didn't know until I started this process, and that kind of spurred me on a little bit.
And let's probably start with let's start with Judith, because this is a tragic, brutal, horrific murder. She was 14. She was out on her bike. Let's talk about the details. And guys, those of you that are new to this is quite a horrible case. So I'm going to say that, because this is quite, you know, she's only a year older than my daughter. You know, it's such a sad cause, and any age is dreadful, but so young, so young. And she just had a little bit of a argument with her family, went out for a bike ride, and never to see her again. It's just so sad.
Yeah,
so tell us, Tanita.
Well, like you say, Nancy, it's incredibly sad. She was so young, and she, you know, she was a sister, she was a twin, she was a daughter, she was a friend. And what happened to her was just, you know, nothing short of incredibly tragic and incredibly sad. And so, like you say, she had been at home on the day she was last seen with her family. She'd come back from school. She'd had a bit of a, you know, she'd been reprimanded by her dad for not eating her dinner, you know, nothing kind of big, but just family stuff. And so she went out for a ride on her bike, which she often did. It was, you know, a pastime of Judith. She would go out on her bike quite regularly. It's the summer, you know, the sun is up, the sun is shining. And unfortunately, what happened to Judith on that ride out? Well, there's been speculation. There was then obviously a whole court case around what happened to her. And in our book, we talk about the fact that we think she's come across Peter Sutcliffe in the early 70s, way before he was ever on anybody's radar. You know, and we have some kind of quite serious grounds for thinking so. And having done a lot of research, you know, when you look at it, you start to build up this you know, these reasons, and you think, my goodness, there is this real possibility that yes, she came across Sutcliffe when you look at everything, when you look at the evidence. But then what had actually happened was Andrew Evans, 17, not much older than Judith. You know, if Judith is 14, Andrew Evans is only 17. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I think back to being 17, you're just a child, you're just a baby, you don't know anything, you know, you are so young. And Andrew Evans is then dragged into this, you know, he walks into a police station having had these awful dreams that he thinks he's killed Judith. And he starts talking to the police about it, you know, kind of naively thinking, well, nothing's going to come of it. Maybe, you know, we talk in the book about false memory. And unfortunately, it seems like it's just the perfect storm, really. The police are so adamant that they need to catch Judith's killer, as they should be. But they end up almost with this person saying, well, I did it. And I think they're looking for that, you know, answer that will solve everything, put this away as quickly as possible, deliver justice as swiftly as possible. And unfortunately, it means that Andrew Evans then faces, you know, decades behind bars for something that ultimately he is then relinquished from. So it is a truly, truly sad and tragic story all round in terms of, you know, children losing their lives, and then also a young man being behind bars for something that I think, had it been done by today's standards, there would have been a very different outcome.
Yeah, well, the book certainly highlights quite a number of sloppy flaws in that interrogation procedure. In the whole thing was just quite flawed, wasn't it? You had a question, Lisa.
Well, it's just because this book, it's really two stories in one, isn't it? It's a story of Peter Sutcliffe and his crimes, and how he was how he was allowed to get away with what he was doing for so long. And then also this story over here of Andrew, and though obviously they're intertwined. Shall we stay with Peter Sutcliffe for a minute, and then we'll talk about this miscarriage of justice? But one of the most fascinating parts of this book is how it's sort of like it tells us a lot that maybe we don't know about Sutcliffe, particularly about how he was a very early offender, wasn't he? He did this crime, and then there was a long period of time before he committed the crimes that we know about. But this book is basically saying Judith and others were victims in the middle of all of this. And had he been properly, if they had addressed his first offence, the socks and the rocks, properly, the rest might not have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. That first crime in 1969, that is so vital for when we look at Peter Sutcliffe's offending. And I think it tells us a lot about his MO and how he operated. And then when you look at the others, and you look at the other victims, and you look at Judith, and you look at the women who survived as well, there is this thread that kind of comes through, you know, and once you start to really forensically analyze it, you see a lot of similarities. And that's Stone in the Sock incident. You know, he attacked a woman just for almost, you know, a disagreement, and he attacks her. And he could have, you know, he seriously did hurt this woman. And had he just, you know, had it been a bit heavier, or, you know, had he caught her at a different angle, he could have ended up killing this woman. You know, it's certainly nothing to say that she survived. And then when you look, yes, again, at the other victims and the other survivors and how they were attacked, and also Peter Sutcliffe he's a very dainty man. You know, although for the vicious injuries that he caused, you know, you wouldn't think that this 5 foot something, you know, Yorkshire man could be responsible. But actually, when you look at Yvonne Pearson, or you look at, you know, Josephine Whitaker, or any of the other women, those injuries are really, really vicious and really, you know, quite awful. So you know, looking at Judith, yes, you can absolutely see the similarities in those attacks.
And you talk a lot in here as well, which is really interesting, about how the police had some assumptions about the type of offender that was out there, didn't they? And they didn't believe that Sutcliffe could be doing these crimes because they had an idea already of what he was like. Can you run us through a little bit about that, about how the police kind of had one idea, and so Sutcliffe didn't fit their idea of this offender?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think they had an idea about the type of offender he was, the types of weapons he used, the types of, you know, the time at which he would offend. But I think the thing that stood out for me is that they really missed with Sutcliffe is he was opportunistic through and through. There is no doubt in my mind that these were attacks that he carried out when he felt he could. You know, he wasn't planning, in a sense, to do them at a certain time. Although I do believe that as time went on, he kind of understood approaching a certain type of victim or taking them to a certain place then meant that he was more likely to get away with it. You know, and the police focused so heavily, especially in the mid-70s to the early 80s when he was arrested, they focused so heavily on the type of woman that Peter Sutcliffe was going to attack. And based on that assumption, they left it so open for him to carry out other attacks or to, you know, do other things that meant he went undetected. And, you know, that's a real shame. And it's really, I appreciate it's very easy for me to sit here in 2025 and cast aspersions on the police. And I certainly don't mean to drag all their hard work through the mud, because I do think through and through these men and women wanted to catch Peter Sutcliffe and they were doing their best. But unfortunately, because of attitudes at the time, because of their, you know, sort of, what's it called? You know, they just had this really blinkered view as to who was killing these women, who was attacking these women, and it couldn't possibly be anyone else, and it couldn't possibly be any other type of victim. And I mean, you know, we had the tapes where, you know, George Oldfield was essentially tricked into believing it was somebody completely different. And, you know, we now know that it wasn't Sutcliffe who had sent those tapes, it was somebody else. So that whole investigation was totally bungled by the fact that I think they were just so determined to catch him that it meant that they were blinkered, and it meant that their, you know, view was so skewed as to who they were going after. It is such a shame that their hard work ended up being, you know, the result of it ended up being, you know, a long list of failures and ways in which they could have done it better.
It's hard to fathom, isn't it?
It really is. And during that time as well, you obviously had all of the media coverage painting the victims of Sutcliffe, leaning into, you know, the fact that they were, you know, very derogatory, you know, not even kind enough to call them sex workers. You know, it was just very, very difficult. And it's easy to sit here, isn't it, with what we know now in the true crime genre and the way that we sit, but it is very uncomfortable. And at the narrative through the entire book, you're leaning into Sutcliffe, the murders he did, the victims that survived. You're peppering his life, his movements and what he's doing, the whole time pulling back on reinforcing why you and Chris believe that definitely 100% you feel that Judith fell to her death because of Sutcliffe. And after reading it, you know, front to back, there's not one bit of evidence in there that you've presented that makes you think otherwise, actually. How did you feel, Lisa?
I agree. And it's the other shocking thing is it's not just this case. You know, in the book you've got other cases, haven't you, where you've got more women who have got the same MO. Why is it taken so long for people to link these? Is it because everybody just thought that he was operating in his area? Because as Nancy just said, you talk about, you know, Sonia was obviously, they weren't married at that point, and she was off somewhere and he was driving all over the place, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. And also something that when you look back over, especially in the 70s, and again, we're focusing on this time in which there's a lot known about him, but, you know, as well as driving all over the country, you know, just for Sonia and for family, you know, Sutcliffe was driving for a living, you know, he was working, you know, as a lorry driver. But also something that Chris and I picked up on is that Peter Sutcliffe changed cars a lot. I mean, I sort of about between the early 70s to sort of late 70s, I think I counted about 5 or 6 different cars, and sometimes Sutcliffe had 2 cars at the same time. You know, for a couple of weeks he'd sell one on and then he'd keep the other, and so you sort of start to look at his, you know, that his mode of transport really did play into his offending. And if he just had, we know lots of other serial offenders who keep one particular vehicle, and it's a very distinct type of vehicle. And we do associate Peter Sutcliffe with that, but also in his personal life, he knew cars, and he was quite happy to chop and change cars. And at one point, the police, especially when they were looking into the confirmed attacks, police wanted to have tyres tested on his car. Something that they actually did fail to do when they were investigating him was check the tyres on his cars. They wanted to look more closely at his vehicles. And so Peter Sutcliffe is driving around. He knows the roads. He knows the areas very well. I mean, he's certainly not afraid to drive one end of the country from one end to the other. In a single day. It is something that crops up time and time again. So, and when you look at where Judith was found and where Judith's case occurred, she's right off the motorway of which he would have taken down to Sonia, between where he was staying in the early 70s and where Sonia was. And so, and it is just off. It would have taken absolutely no time at all to take a detour for whatever reason, and then get back on the motorway and be down in London, by tea time.
It's incredible, isn't it? To think. I think another thing that's quite chilling when you're reading this book is a few of the victims, the surviving victims, talk about him falling into step next to them and like chatting to them, and doesn't one of the girls even turns around to thank him for a nice chat while she's walking home, only to be hit. So another thing that this kind of addresses is that these people are monsters, but they look like everybody else.
And I think that was part of how he operated. He was unassuming. He wasn't, he didn't have fangs and, horns and the kind of thing that you would think. He did just look like a very normal, average, guy at the time. And, you talk about it's Tracy Brown. She's having a walk with him one evening and he's quite happy to chat along. And I think Tracy is also really important as well, because for those who haven't read the book, when I was working on the ITV documentary, I spoke to a number of police officers, and spoke to them about different women who we believe Sutcliffe attacked and who Chris and Tim outlined in their book that he may have attacked. And one of the officers did turn around and say, I don't believe it for a second, and here's a list of reasons why. And one of them being, well, he only attacked women, he only attacked, adults, and that's just not true. He attacked Tracy Brown. She's 14. She's exactly the same age as Judith. Look at Jane McDonald. She's only 16. She's only a couple of years older. So that whole MO of he only attacks adult women or he only attacks sex workers, it's just not true when you start to really look at the victimology of these women and you start to look at his offending patterns. And yeah, he would just quite happily fall into step. Anna Rogalski, another one, he tried to sort of chat with her and tried to get her to come with him, and Anna, being the feisty woman we understand her to be, said, not on your life, leave me alone. And then just for saying that, he attacks her. And in Tracy Brown, quite pleasant interaction, and she can see her home. That's even more scary. She can see her home as she's approaching, and he still attacks her. He is very brazen. I don't believe Peter Sutcliffe was shy about his offending. He was, as I say, opportunistic, and he just got more and more brazen as time went on.
I have to congratulate you and Chris on your writing style of this book, Tanita, because
thank you.
You're covering a very notorious serial killer, someone who's featured in many docs, many books, many stories around a table when people are chatting about true crime, and yet you pepper throughout the entire book the victims, their stories. You feel a real warmth to every single woman and girl that you are covering in this book, and even and we'll come to the wrongful conviction, but the emotion you get for Andrew Evans as well as a reader. I think you've done it very well, actually.
Thank
I
you. That
think
meknow a lot.
I think it's extremely sensitive and respectful, considering there are an awful lot of women. You're covering a lot. You don't feel like you're just bashing through this book at all. It's it's very, very well written, actually, in it being very victims foremost, definitely.
And that was really important to us writing it, and there are lots of ways in which we try to distinguish this from, there are lots of brilliant books written about Peter Sutcliffe, and about the women and about Peter Sutcliffe's movements. And so I felt, or certainly we felt, we weren't trying to replicate what had been done before, but there was no denying that, you go to any kind of bookshelf or any true crime book sale, there will be a book on Peter Sutcliffe.
But Tanita, you and Chris do that very well in the book as well. You credit every author and every book as you reference it through. So if anyone does want further reading, they can pick it up. And anyone that's already done a piece of research is getting a nod to the work that they've already done in this particular case. It's I've got a number of questions here that have been sent over. Lisa, whilst I get them together, that's been emailed in, do you want to carry on, babe?
Well, let's talk about Andrew Evans, this poor young man, and it almost feels stranger than fiction. Tell us about Andrew. Just tell us about Andrew, because it's hard to believe when you're reading it that the police actually ended up, not just the police, but the jury ended up convicting this young man.
Andrew Evans is just, I want to say, unfortunately, he's wrong place, wrong time, but you can't discount the fact that he walks into this police station, this awful murder happens practically on his doorstep, and also the media do cover it extensively. This was something that was really important to point out. Judith's case, absolutely, it rocked the nation. The Midlands, where it occurred, was totally awash with media coverage from, the local sort of Tamworth, Herald, or the Birmingham Mail. They all had, lengthy reporting about it and about the person who could have done it, and the fear of the parents for their own, for other children. And Andrew Evans does seem to just go straight into this storm, and he, for one reason or another, is convinced that he's somehow attached to it. And I mean, I have to be honest, I still don't fully understand why, but it's easy to see what happens and how he just walks into the lion's den, and he says, I've had these dreams, I keep picturing this girl's face, I feel like maybe I've had something to do with it, I don't know. He's very confused. He's been at the local barracks, he's 17 years old, but he has been discharged quite recently due to health reasons. And so he's not in a good place at the time, and he walks into the police station. The police then immediately, of course, want to question him, as I would expect them to. They want to question him, but he is questioned at length. And I mean, the transcripts in the book show you just how fiercely he is questioned over this murder. And also, I think rather than, let's just say there was no physical evidence, in terms of hard evidence that placed Andrew Evans at the scene. But one of the things that I think the lead officer focused on was that Andrew Evans knew where Judith's body had been found. And it was really quite shocking in doing the research when you go to trial, and this lead officer is the last person to give evidence, so that's really quite impactful to a jury who've listened to everything, this really awful murder, and then they've got the officer standing up. He's one of the last to give evidence, and he says there's no way that Andrew Evans could have known where the body was. And I had found, it's a newspaper article from, and I forget now whether it was Birmingham Mail or the local Tamworth Herald, but there are multiple reports of where Judith's body has been found. There's even a map with an X marking the spot of this is where this young woman's body is found. But somehow, because Andrew Evans can recall where that is, he must have done this. And I mean, that for me was just, completely shocking to say to a jury, there's no way he could have known. But yet, I'm looking at a report that has literally got an X in the field next to the gate where she was found. And it's just incredible. So you really have got to feel for Andrew, and then you know he is convicted of murder, and also once he is convicted of murder, the fingerprint evidence that the police have collected is then destroyed. You know, so they, as far as the police and the jury and the judge and the rest of the nation are concerned, we've got our man. That's it. And the evidence is, you know, the fingerprint evidence is destroyed, and Andrew Evans goes to jail. But what's happened actually in that time is Andrew Evans has started to think a bit more clearly under the direction of, you know, his family and his lawyers. And actually now he's starting to say, actually, I didn't do this. And now I'm realizing what's happened. But by that point, it's already too late. So then he has to spend the next, you know, 20 plus years fighting to clear his name. And I mean, thankfully, he eventually does. He does clear his name. But that is not to say that, I mean, he is about 17, 18 when he goes to prison. He's, you know, his young life is completely gone by the time he is released. I can't imagine, you know, having experienced that and coming out into the world and, you know, a murder conviction just in your shadow, despite the fact that you've had that conviction quashed. You must live under that for such a long time.
The world would have changed so enormously in that formative time. He would have gone, and there'd be no mobile phones and no Google. It's when I was reading it, because it does seem so improbable that he's fine, isn't he? Like he doesn't think anything of it, and then he fills out a form to say I was on leave or whatever, and I was at my barracks. But then the police come to his house, and that's when he starts to convince himself that he's done it. And I mean, as I was reading it, as I have something called obsessive compulsive disorder, and a large part of that is intrusive thoughts. And sometimes you can think something which is totally not true. And I've read lots of books about people who have obsessive compulsive disorder who convince themselves they've knocked somebody down in their car, so they go round and round and round. So as I was reading it, I was thinking, this young man has got some sort of undiagnosed mental health condition, and he's just having these thoughts which are not true. But then they start pumping him with truth serum. Does this actually happen? They gave him truth serum?
Yes. So, you know, this was obviously, I mean, you would never get away with something like this in you know, today. But yeah, they start administering him a drug in which to kind of coax these memories out of him. And I mean, you know, and then that is presented to a jury of, we've given him truth serum, and this is what has come out. And I mean, the whole thing is just totally maniacal. You can't imagine that would ever actually happen, but it does. And I'm so glad we have the transcripts to, you know, to talk the readers through this process, because I think if you just said this to someone, they wouldn't believe you. They wouldn't believe that police behaved in this way. But I think it is down to the fact that, you know, don't get me wrong, what happened just should never have happened. But I think they are so determined to find what happened to Judith that they are just going to any length to get the man, and they think they've got their man. That's the thing. I think they're so focused on Andrew, and he is a lamb to the slaughter. Excuse the expression.
He was, but he did go in. He did go in when he said, "I think I've done this," and he said at home, "I'm going in. I think I've done this." He did go in saying, "If you show me the body, if you show me the pictures, it might jog my memory." And as an officer, that's going to certainly send alarm bells. You know, is this someone that has done this that now wants to, you know, bask in the glory of what they've done and see it again? You know, so when you see little bits of information like that throughout the book, you can understand why it's happened. You can understand why it's happened. It doesn't make it right. It certainly doesn't make it right, but there are certain things that have happened that certainly wouldn't happen today. I mean, this is the problem now, isn't there? The fingerprints go. So they've now said he was wrongfully convicted, but now there is no one that has been convicted for Judith's murder. You know, that's just not happened, and not for the want of Chris trying to get that re-looked at and his persistence. It just kept coming down to no, didn't it? Computer says no, we're not gonna reopen, relook, go away type of answer.
Chris is incredibly tenacious, and he is he's incredibly passionate about this subject. And if he were here, he would be able to tell you all the many ways in which he has tried to progress this further. We both have, and it does end up, like you say, just coming down to no. And I don't know if that's because there's an element of wanting to forget, or exactly why that is, that there is no, you've got a conviction that's been quashed, so now what? And it's come to this lull, but yet there doesn't seem to be any kind of fight for answers for Judith's family and for those that remember Judith, and for the members of the public who still remember her and still fondly remember this young girl. And it's really quite sad that is the case. But yeah, I mean, Chris has tried an unreal amount to pursue that, and I think that eventually something will have to give. There are elements of the independent reports and after Peter Sutcliffe was arrested that have never been disclosed to the public, and I think the big thing now is that's got to change. After all this time, we know that the police didn't get it right, so now let's focus on what we can do to put it right here and now.
Why haven't those reports been disclosed? Do you think it's to protect someone from embarrassment?
Honestly, I think yes, a little bit of it is down to the police are embarrassed by what's happened. They know that every time the subject gets brought up, they get the flack for it, and I think that it is down to that. But I don't know why the public interest, why that isn't stronger than the feeling of embarrassment of we got this wrong. There is still work going on behind the scenes of people trying to get those pages released. I'm not, they're not particularly having any great luck, but there are still certainly people who are saying enough is enough now. We need to see those other pages. We need to know the full story, because even though Peter Sutcliffe is dead, his story and the story of those women who he attacked, and possibly other men too, that hasn't ended.
Not if there are people out there who are almost certain that he was the offender in their loved ones' cases. They're not getting justice at all, are they? Or I'd hate to say the word closure, but they're not getting justice, are they?
No, not at all. And it was really quite apparent when we did the documentary, and there are other loved ones who the information does point to Sutcliffe. It's not it's not just someone going, oh well, it was in the same area, so therefore there are real reasons behind these people saying Sutcliffe was involved. And it could be something like Sutcliffe lived in the area, or in one case we had in the documentary, Peter Sutcliffe was asking someone in the pub about the victim one evening, and things like that. So there are all these little tidbits of information that actually they point to other victims of Peter Sutcliffe, and these women and these potentially even men, they've never had those answers. And I think it is about time we stop hiding behind that embarrassment and just move forward and get justice for those men and women and their loved ones, because their time is running out too as well.
That's it. Everyone's getting older, aren't they?
Yeah. When you, Tanita, as you were doing all of this research and working with Chris, you very strongly put forward so many similarities, so many examples of why you strongly believe that this definitely was, Judith's murder definitely was by Peter Sutcliffe's hand. And you go through that. During all of this investigation, was there ever a curveball where you questioned it? Did you ever doubt it at any point, or did any other suspect or any other line of investigation make you go otherwise? Or was it always from the beginning, yes, 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 yes?
I always tried to be, I always tried to remain unbiased, and I always tried to follow the research that we did. And I mean, the problem was with Judith's case was that there really were no other suspects. And actually, I will just kind of caveat that with, I think at one point there was a suggestion that somebody local could have been involved, but that never went any further with the police. I believe that person had an alibi that was provided, or and the evidence didn't point towards them. And other than that brief mention of somebody local, there were no other suspects mentioned. And I found that incredibly telling. You know, in kind of, I've worked across the true crime genre a lot, and I've seen lots of different cases, and you know, there are cases where there's multiple suspects and multiple, you know, potential offenders, and it just seemed really bizarre to me that in Judith's case there wasn't, you know, once they'd caught Andrew Evans, and once we, you know, we take Andrew Evans out the equation, but there wasn't another suspect that you could focus on. And so I tried to remain so unbiased when I was doing the research, but nothing ever came up that made me then say, well, it can't be Peter Sutcliffe because of X, Y, Z, or potentially it was this other person because they were in the area. You know, and that is not to say that I have all the answers, far from it, but following the research, I couldn't say that there was anything that took me away from Peter Sutcliffe for even a moment. So that was incredibly telling for me. And I mean, the research was extensive. I think we spent about, you know, 5 years on this book, and I think Chris, even before me, had spent years researching it when he'd done The Secret Murders. Judith was mentioned in the Secret Murders book that he did with Tim Tate, and we decided to pull Judith's story out and focus on that exclusively.
And why did you pick Judith, Tanita?
Do you know, I mean, I didn't particularly pick Judith as much as Chris came to me with Judith's case, and I hadn't, until Chris mentioned it to me, I have to be honest, I didn't know anything about Judith's case, and that was part of the pull for me. Was Chris and I had been talking for years about writing a book together, and when he approached me in 2019, he said, I've got, you know, I've been doing the research on Judith, and you know, if you're following the same kind of wavelength as I am, would you like to collaborate? So I took the research, had a look, spent some time having a look at it, and I arrived at the same conclusion Chris had presented to me, which was she was an early victim of Peter Sutcliffe. And so, but I think Judith's story in particular, because it's a story from the Midlands, which is an area that I was born and I grew up around there, so it's always quite a special place to me. She is a young girl, she is, you know, she's got so much ahead of her, and I just couldn't believe that I didn't know more, or that the public didn't know more about Judith. And so for me, it seemed like a no-brainer of, you've got someone here who their story is at real risk of being forgotten. And I didn't want that. I really didn't want that for Judith. I think she always deserved better in my eyes. And I felt like in doing this, we were honouring her and we were keeping her story in the public domain, keeping it in the public's eye, because there still is a chance, you know, even all those years later, that something will come up. And I think, you know, potentially when those pages are released, we may get more answers. But in the meantime, unless we keep reviewing the evidence, unless we keep focusing on Judith, we keep focusing on her story, we'll never get any further forward for her.
Why do you think it's important to keep these stories alive? Like you say, some people might say, let's just forget it now, it happened years ago, like 50 years ago. I mean, wasn't this 1972?
Yeah.
Was it 1972? So 52, so it's the year that I was born. Some people might say, forget it, but what makes you and Chris want to keep these stories alive?
I think it is just, you know, it is that feeling of, if that were your loved one, or if that were your sister or your friend, wouldn't you want answers? Wouldn't you want people to remember them, and not even necessarily remember them as, you know, I never like to, in whether it's telling stories through, you know, the book or through documentaries, I never want victims to be remembered as just a victim. I want them to be remembered as, you know, friends who, you know, and what they did for their families, and, you know, as sisters, you know, and the real moral of the story, you know, certainly one of them behind everything to do with Peter Sutcliffe, is those women were more than just, you know, the professions they chose. They were women, they were mothers, they were daughters. And so the same goes for Judith, the same goes for keeping these other stories alive. You know, they were people, and they had something awful and tragic happen to them, and we mustn't forget them. We mustn't forget that there is still justice to be done for them. And so I think for us it is just about keeping that passion and keeping that pride in, you know, sensitively telling their stories so that people remember them, because we just don't know what's going to happen in the years to come. And I mean, if we solve Judith's murder and we get answers for her family, then my goodness, wouldn't that be something to have achieved?
That would be remarkable. That would be remarkable. And if true crime content can actually impact change, that is exactly what we want to be, doing, not just telling these stories for storytelling's sake. You know, it can really make a difference. I've just looked up and it's 10 to 9, and no one on this group yet has asked a question, because me and
Oh
Lisa
my
have
goodness.
hogged you.
Well,
We have
I think
absolutely
that's
hogged you.
because we were
Uh,
watching your storytelling.
yeah,
We were wrapped
we've
by
wrapped
everything
you.
you had to say. But people can and should ask us
People
questions.
can. So please, please, please. It's so nice to see so many of you joining today. It's nice to see so many friends and faces from CrimeCon. Hello, Cherry from Crimepedia podcast. I saw you on the chat earlier, Stephen Keogh. Nice to see you, Kim Skerritt. There's quite a lot of favourites. Anne Muir, you're here as well. So please, please, please pen a question over to me so I can present it to Tanita before our time runs out. But did you like writing the book, Tanita? I know you're a journalist, but when you write an article, it's very different
Really
to
enjoy it.
writing a book. And every time I ask this question at book club, everyone says no.
Exhausting for sure.
It is. Did I like it? Oh God. Way to put me on the spot, Nancy. Yes, I did. I did like writing it. You know, it is hard to say when you're talking about something so tragic and so awful. You know, if it's saying you liked doing it, it feels a bit. Yeah, you know, it doesn't feel like it's quite the right way. But I was passionate about it and I committed to it. And there were definitely times where I would be up late in the night, or I would be worrying about, oh goodness me, are we going to be able to do this in the way that we want to? We want to do it sensitively. We want to do it so that it's in keeping with our values as storytellers and as, you know, writers and journalists and former police officers, you know. And I think that was the thing that kept me up at night. How are we going to do this in the way that it's a product we can be proud to share with other people, and you know, keep Judith at the front and the front and center. She is what matters. So there were times where it was great. You know, I love immersing myself in research. I mean, my partner will tell you, when we've been on holiday, he's lost me to multiple archives when we've been away, and he's just absolutely furious that we went to Australia a few years ago, and he's like, what do you want to do today? I said, I want to go to the New South Wales archives for the day. So if that doesn't say everything about me, then I don't know what does. But you know, the research and really getting into the detail is where I thrive. But then on the other side of it, you have such responsibility. And you know, you want to make sure you're doing everything justice in what you do. So it has its good and its bad points for sure.
Cherry's just said at Crimepedia podcast, if there was anyone to tell this story sensitively, it's Tanita. She's lovely. Lots of love in the room for you. Can I ask you a question? Because it's been really, really on my mind. If you could ask one person involved in this case a question, who would it be and what would you ask? Dead or
One
alive?
person in this case, if I could ask them, I don't know if I'd waste asking Peter Sutcliffe if he really did it, because I don't think I'd get a straight answer. So I think I would ask Andrew Evans what happened.
Exactly.
You know, and I don't mean what happened in the room, but what happened for him in those thoughts that he was having about Judith. If I still find it hard to imagine what kind of state he was in to be in that situation. And so I think that would be my question to Andrew Evans, was what happened? You know, and you know, potentially how can we avoid it in the future? I know there's been a lot that's, you know, we've gone a long way in understanding mental health, and particularly around, you know, crime and, you know, justice, but what happened for him, and what could we do to ensure that something like that never, and I mean never, happens again?
Yeah, for sure. because that was a long time to be wrongfully imprisoned. Anne Muir's just asked you a question. Does Tanita have more true crime she'd like to explore for future books or documentaries?
Oh my goodness, so much, so much. I mean, I've been in this genre now for almost 10 years, and I don't think I ever run out of questions or areas of interest. What I can say is there is another book that is currently being written. I'm hoping it won't take another 5 years to see the light of day. So there is another book, and it's a similar strain in terms of, you know, potentially other victims and a thorough investigation of a person who is still alive, shall we say, and who there are still many questions around who else he killed, or how many other victims there are. And in terms of documentaries, there's some really great work happening, and I can't share the details of it with you right now because there's still a lot going on, but we are focusing, or rather I am focusing on, with a production company, a UK case. And all I can say is there is so much to come out of it, and I hope that actually in working with the people we're working with, we're going to see real change come off the back of it. So I'm really, when that can be shared, I will talk about it until the cows come home. But for now, it's still in a bit of a precarious place, so I can't say much more.
If it's not before June, then meet her in the bar and just buy her a coffee or a glass of wine. Tessie XX says, if new evidence comes to light proving Judith was a victim of Peter Sutcliffe, how can Sutcliffe be officially charged with her murder, given that he has passed?
I mean, I don't think he can now, because he's dead. The sad thing is, there can't be a formal charge against him. But I mean, there have been plenty of other cases where someone has passed and the police have said if they were alive, we would be charging them with this murder. And I think just having someone formally recognise that, I think does, you know, a tremendous amount of good, even all those years later. Just having someone in the police force say, we are that confident, because it's hard to get a charge past the criminal prosecution service. It is a really high bar. So if the police are saying we would be taking this to CPS and getting a charge issued, then I think that is an incredible feat to be recognised.
And Tessie does follow up with, sorry, Tanita, I know you're not a prosecutor. So there you go. And Muir says, tantalising. This is about your next ventures. So thank you. Good luck with everything. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing you you in all your next bits and pieces, Tanita, and I'm hoping I find out soon. So that's exciting. That is exciting. So, Lisa, any other questions from you?
Not really, except for to ask, what do you hope readers take away from this book? If you had them take away one thing, what would it be?
Let them take away one thing.
It doesn't have to be one, could be many.
Well, I mean, one thing that we didn't touch upon, which I would just like to mention because I'm extremely proud of it in terms of us writing the book, is we wrote this book wanting it to be sensitive, wanting it to be about the women and about the victims and about their families. And in trying to do that, people may have clocked on, I think I've mentioned it in the book, is that we have removed Peter Sutcliffe's moniker from this book. And we've done that very deliberately. And there were a few discussions with publishers around the time about what we were going to call the book. And the strong position for me was, I don't want Peter Sutcliffe being referred to as the Ripper, the Yorkshire Ripper, because I've seen firsthand actually how hard it is for those who've lost their mothers or lost their sisters, and what that brings up for them every time. And so what I'd like them to take away is that everything we've done in this book, we have done to try and be as sensitive yet as informative as possible. And I hope that is something that they do take from the book and kind of go, you know, are proud to put it on their bookshelves, knowing that we've tried to do that.
You certainly have. Tessie's just said, thank you for answering her question. She's ordered the book with next day delivery. She can't wait to read. Yes. So if you have any, if you have any further questions once you read it, be sure to email me, and I'll ask Tanita if you've got any other comments or questions to have. I'm sure I can ask her. That's brilliant.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, listen, Tanita, it's been absolutely lovely. Please, please, please send our massive regards and thanks to Chris. And I am sad that he couldn't join, but for one reason or another, he's not here. But he can watch this on catch up on the website or on YouTube. So, Chris, well done. Keep up the good work, because I know this is one of many that you've done. So hopefully we will see you and Chris do another piece of work together, because it's been it was really insightful, Tanita. You should be really proud of it.
Thank you both, and thank you so much for having us on, and just being the wonderful host you are. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Lovely. Well, we will see you at CrimeCon, won't we? You're a big fan, and you'll be signing books this time.
Yes. I'll see you all in the bar.
Yeah. So bring your books, and Tanita will sign them as part of our book signing session at CrimeCon, which will be great. So we look forward to seeing you in June, which really isn't that far away now, is it? So we've got London in June and CrimeCon September in Manchester. So new location for CrimeCon in September, and June in London. So we shall see you there. So thank you ever so much, Tanita. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
See you later.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you
very much.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Oh, she's a lovely lady. She's still here. You go. You're still here. Oh, yeah. Look, this is the bit when I talk about you, but you're still here.
Talking about you.
You can stay. I don't mind you staying. I'm just gonna let everyone know what we're doing next. So we're getting together next, guys, on the 11th of March. Please forgive Lisa and I. We both can't do next month for one reason or another. So we're having a little while longer to read it. We'll be getting together on the 11th of March, and we will be reading A Spy in My Family by Paul Henderson and David Gardner, both who will be joining us on the 11th of March. You can pre-order a copy of that book now. It gets released in late February, so you'll have time to get your eyes or ears on it. So I look forward to doing that one. That is a brand new book and brand new couple of authors for us to have a chat to, isn't it, Liz?
Completely hot off the press, that one. When David was saying you can't get it till February, I'm like, I'm gonna have to read really fast.
No, we can get it, and we can get reading, so that'll be good. But wasn't that insightful, that session?
Yeah, and she did well, because she thought there would be two of them, and she was put on the spot, wasn't she? But fascinating. And it's one of those books where you think it's going to be a really tough read. It's not tough to read. It's very sensitively done, isn't it? And it's really well written and well researched. You can see why it took 5 years to put it together.
Yeah.
And there's stuff in there that maybe people just don't know. You think you know everything about a case that's as famous as Peter Sutcliffe, but it kind of hits that liminal space between his known crimes, doesn't it? Like before what we knew he was doing, and it makes a really compelling case, doesn't it, for him being involved in a lot more than he was ever convicted for.
Yeah, but I think she's right not to waste her question on him, because she wouldn't have got a straight answer.
That was my exact question, and my exact question would also have been to poor Andrew, like, what made you do it, honey? What made you go into that and say, I think I've done so? I mean, I think I might know, being an obsessive compulsive, you get these thoughts that have got nothing to do with anything, and then you've suddenly convinced yourself that you have done something. But what a shame for him.
Yeah, what a waste. What a long time to be there. It's very sad. So I would like to get cracking on the next one as soon as we can, and do this all over again with you on the 11th of March. So I'm just going to I'm just going to remind everyone, tonight, True Crime, 10 p.m, our very favourite Professor David Wilson is on, Murder UK. So yes, so get over there at 10 o'clock on True Crime. So I'll be watching that. But before that, there's if you're into forensics, there's Forensic Affair on at 9. So I'm going to grab another cup of tea and go and watch that. And I will see you soon. If you haven't got your tickets yet for CrimeCon, what are you waiting for? Come and have these long, in-depth chats. over a coffee at the bar. It's all we do, and we are very privileged that everyone gives up so much of their time to spend time with us, giving us their insights. So it's a nice way to just spend a weekend. So hopefully we will see you there. So if you haven't got your tickets, quote book club, and we will give you a nice little discount. So I will see you soon, Lisa. Yeah.
I'll see you soon, baby girl. Yeah.
Lots of love. Thank you for joining, everyone. Always lovely to see you. A pleasure. See you later, guys. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
If you're fascinated by true crime, then join us in June 2025 for CrimeCon London. Meet the biggest names in true crime TV, experience live forensic demonstrations, and dive deep into the criminal mind with your favourite authors, podcasters, and content creators. To secure your place, go to crimecon.co.uk now and be part of the UK's biggest true crime community. CrimeCon London, partnered by True Crime, 7th and 8th of June 2025.